Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks, is there anything that can be done to talk somebody out of a bad idea? So another question I have related to this is, are bad ideas tied to any type of psychopathology or personality characteristics? So I've heard this question from the clinical perspective, like how can counselors talk clients out of bad ideas? But I've also heard it from a non-clinical perspective. So how can a brother talk a sister out of a bad idea, or a coworker talk another coworker out of a bad idea, something like that. Interestingly, in terms of the clinical side, it's not always the counselor's job to talk somebody out of a bad idea. That's not always the best strategy, but rather to help a client clarify their perspective and values and make a decision that makes sense for them and works for them. Clearly, however, certain ideas seem bad in almost every way, meaning they have negative consequences for the client. So that's what I'm really talking about here when I say a bad idea. Not bad in the sense of right or wrong or good or evil, but in the sense of not good for the client. So dangerous, harmful, an idea that will make them lose money or put them at risk or put other people at risk, something like that. Reflecting on these types of clinical experiences between counselors and clients may be applicable in any number of situations where someone is worried about someone else who appears to be making a bad decision. So I'll use some different examples here. They are sourced from a variety of places, my clinical and administrative experience, examples I've seen in various trainings and meetings, as well as some other places. But details have been removed or changed to protect identities. So bad ideas or bad decisions represent one of the most challenging clinical concepts for counselors in terms of something that happens regularly. Obviously, self-harm or aggressive behavior is often considered one of the most urgent types of complaints or situations, but these situations don't happen for one counselor on an everyday basis. At least I'd hope not. That would be a counselor dealing with a lot of risk and a lot of danger. And for that matter, a particular counselor wouldn't necessarily hear bad ideas every day either. It's just that that would be more common than some of the more extreme occurrences I was talking about. The reason that bad ideas are challenging is because most counselors try to avoid giving clients direct advice. And this may not seem like a big deal, but it actually makes counseling a lot different than many other professions. Imagine if somebody's accused of a crime and they go to a lawyer and they ask if they should take a plea deal or go to a jury trial. And the lawyer says, how does this dilemma make you feel? Right? That's not a helpful response in that situation. Perhaps somebody's having some sort of problem with taxes and they go to an accountant and they say, should I take this deduction, this tax deduction, or not? And the accountant says, what does it say about you that you want me to answer this question, right? This is kind of a common counseling response we see. It means I want you to answer the question, right? There's no deeper level to this, right? It's just taxes. It's really kind of a straightforward type of issue. Either you take the tax deduction or you don't. It doesn't really have a complex emotional component to it. But in the world of counseling, we tend to think there is a deeper level to just about everything that we deal with. And because we work hard not to impose our values on other people, it really makes this area of direct advice kind of tricky. So even in situations where a client has an idea that appears to be a really bad idea, like, again, a plan to do something risky, counselors usually don't jump right to an answer, but rather try to engage in a dialogue first. And we hope that through that dialogue, the right answer will surface. It's this dialogue itself that can be actually pretty useful in terms of helping somebody reflect and hopefully avoid making a bad decision. So just to be clear, bad ideas or bad decisions can come from anybody, whether somebody has a mental disorder or not. Most mental disorders don't affect the area of judgment, but some do, particularly at certain phases of certain disorders. Some are more strongly associated with decisions that don't seem really helpful. So some examples. Someone comes into a session and they haven't been in a romantic relationship for a long time. And they say they found the love of their life. They just met them and they're planning to move in with that person later that same day, right? So this type of idea, which some would characterize as bad, under the way I've defined bad here, would be more common with some types of personality pathology, like borderline or histrionic personality disorders. So what could be done in a situation like this? Well, I think it makes sense to try to slow down the decision-making process, to emphasize that there's really no rush, because this idea might be a bad idea because of the speed, not necessarily because they're looking for a romantic partner. We know, of course, this is a very common behavior. It may make sense to help the person explore past behaviors, any patterns that seem to be in their history, and explore what the consequences were from those behaviors that occurred in the past. It's challenging to help somebody evaluate an idea when the emotions around that idea are strong, which of course is much of the time, right? We know that a lot of bad ideas and bad decisions are motivated from emotional reactions. So another example, I live in the state of Delaware. Delaware is the first state, and actually I live in the first county, Newcastle County. And in this county, there are places that somebody can gamble. And on top of that, we're only about an hour and a half from Atlantic City. And of course, there are a lot of places to gamble there. So it's not unusual in this area when somebody comes in who may have psychosis or mania that they will develop like a grandiose plan to win big at the casinos. Could be a disorder like schizophrenia, maybe bipolar disorder. So with schizophrenia, that's where we may see psychosis. With bipolar disorder, we may see mania. And it could be something like schizoaffective disorder as well, which is really a combination of symptoms from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Of course, there are other disorders that could lead to psychosis as well. But either way, we could see something like that. Somebody believes they're going to win big at a casino. Now, usually this bad idea is based on some sort of system. So I'll give an example here. This is one that I've heard about many times. It's called bet doubling, the so-called martingale system. So let's say somebody goes to a casino and they're betting on a game and they start with a bet of $1. If they lose, they play again, except now they bet $2. So if they win that second bet, they're up $1, right? So their loss of $1 from the first round has been washed away and they're up $1 total. Now again, that's if they win. If they lose, they move up to a bet of $4. And this goes on and on until there's a win. And if at any point there is a win, the person is up $1 or 1 unit, however you want to think about it. So instead of $1, $2, $4, $8, it could be 10, 20, 40, 80, whatever. But either way, winning results in them being up 1 unit. At first glance, this seems like it makes a lot of sense. The person has to win eventually, and anytime there's a win, again, they're going to be up $1 in the scenario I used. So what's the problem with this logic? Well, the problem here is that it presumes that the person has an infinite amount of money to gamble, and there's no betting limit for that particular game. So we know that in casinos, the house always has the advantage, right? In the end, the casino is always going to win. So the chance at winning any particular game is always less than 50-50. Again, the house always has that advantage in every single game. So eventually there will be a streak of losses, and these losses will extend to where they reach the limit that the person can bet. So there won't be an opportunity to double the bet after that last loss. And with those losses, even if there's just a few of them, they can wipe out a tremendous number of gains. Consider a situation where somebody bet 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and $64. If that last bet is the last bet that they can make, and they lose it, they've lost $127. So in order to break even, they have to win 127 times, because again, they're just winning $1 each time they win with this strategy. So sometimes with ideas like this that seem to make sense at first glance, this can really trip a counselor up, right? Because counseling professionals aren't necessarily good at math. The counselor might think, this doesn't seem like a bad idea, and they might be skeptical that it's a good idea, so they may come to a conclusion that it's more or less neutral. Now in the end, as I mentioned, casinos always have the advantage, so a counselor doesn't really need to understand the math to help a client who has this idea. I think a logical explanation of why the system doesn't work could be helpful, but additional options could be letting the client know that if they thought of this idea, somebody else has thought of it, and if somebody else has thought of it, casinos have certainly thought of it. So if they allow it, it's not a situation where they are going to lose, because they're not going to allow behavior that causes them to lose money. Another strategy here could be involving family or friends if the client grants permission for that, because they may be able to put things in context. Maybe this type of betting scheme or idea has occurred before and the client lost money. So sometimes family members can really bring important contextual information to a bad idea. So another bad idea I've seen many times is if somebody has a substance use history, but they haven't used in a long time, they may think that they can use a little bit like have one drink, for example, and they won't go back to the way things were. Often the motivation for this is social in nature. Their friends use substances and the client doesn't, and the client doesn't want to be left out of get-togethers, right? They don't want to be left out of social interactions. It's costing them relationships because they're not using. It's extremely unlikely that their idea of using a little bit would be successful. I guess technically it's possible that it could work out, but again, I think quite unlikely. And the typical motivation for this type of idea, again, is very strong. So what could be helpful in this situation? I think what would be helpful here is reminding the client that they have a lot to lose in this situation and not necessarily a lot to gain, right? So yes, they want those relationships, but are those really worth it compared to the risk? Sometimes it's not a matter of the chances being against someone, but rather the risk, even if it is small, is still too great. And here, of course, in this situation, I don't think the risk would be small. Also, this behavior can lead to impairment, which could lead to more bad decisions. So we have to think about how one decision can lead to a variety of bad consequences, some of which, of course, may be quite unexpected. Of course, we can also explore other ways to meet the need for social interaction. That is an important need. The individual can develop friends who don't use, perhaps, right? So there are some other options to get at that core need while moving away from the bad idea component that they're bringing up here in order to meet that need. So taking a step back and looking at all this, kind of summarizing some of the strategies for dealing with bad ideas. I would say slowing down the speed at which decisions are made, that could be helpful. Exploring patterns of behavior. Has the person been through this before? Can past learning help prevent a mistake in the future? Trying to process rationally what the outcome of a particular behavior would be, not just in terms of what's likely, but what the risks are. Are the risks worth the potential benefit? And is there an alternate way to satisfy the goal, the want, or the need? A strategy that can avoid the downside of the bad idea while still really addressing the key issue that the client may have. So I know whenever I talk about ideas like this, there'll be a variety of opinions. Please put those opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate a really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of how to talk somebody out of a bad idea to be interesting. Thanks for watching.